they show a couple of textural effects that you can achieve. Now, the good thing about glass and its transparency and the nature of the light coming through it, sometimes the effect works better if you look on the non-textured side, okay? And most things with glass, certainly when you're working with plate glass like this that's reasonably thick, is that actually if you look at it from the wrong side, it works better, and you can kind of get a landscape feel for things, and you can also get quite an accurate, sharp geometry, and a lot of things in between. This was simply done by taping the entire piece of glass up, cutting it with a sharp scalpel, marking out the pattern first obviously, and then removing each area as and when it needed to be blasted. This was achieved by getting some coarse string, wrapping it round very, very tightly so that there was little thin gaps, okay, and then turning the pressure on the sandblaster up really high so that it hit the string and the gaps between the string, it hit the glass and then kind of sprayed out the way, so you can control the sort of diffusion of how the glass is eroded.
Cover up the main
unblasted, yeah. That acts as a resist, and it works. You can use a lot of materials to act as a resist. For quite hard carving for depth, you need something quite substantial, like a heavy vinyl tape, duct tape. You can use masking tape, but masking tape is actually just sticky paper. You can use masking tape, but you might have to put 2 layers, 3 layers.
It's just better off.
You're better off using a heavy tape. It's got good stickiness. The secret of anything like this is clean, dry, dust and grease-free surface, good sticky adhesive tape. Because the pressure is so intense that once you start blasting away, the pressure and the abrasive nature of the sandblasting can actually lift the edge of the tape. So you want to make sure that your tape is really well burnished down, and always cut with a really, really sharp and cut everything out. Okay, if you start sandblasting and you don't cut areas out, the sandblaster will actually remove your pen. It'll not really harden the tape, but then it'll take the design off because it'll slightly attack the surface of the tape. So you have to kind of draw everything out, and you have to cut everything.
So what did you cut with? Just a little scalpel?
Very fine scalpel.
So you weren't pushing too hard because you didn't want to...
Well, you have to be careful obviously because you can mark the glass, but usually you get a feel for it because you'll feel it puncture the tape, and you'll feel it on the surface. If you press too hard, you usually end up, if you use these really long, thin sort of surgical scalpels, you end up breaking the tip off, and you can feel it break off, and you suddenly feel a sort of roughness as the broken bit is touching the glass.
So you could get quite fine detail.
You can get very fine detail. You can use all kinds of stuff. A good random effect is the hot glue gun. And you know when you squeeze the glue gun and the glue comes out quite molten, you can blodge that onto the surface of the glass, and while it's still hot, you can kind of manipulate it. You have to be careful because it's really, really hot. But if you have a tool or a little spatula or something, yeah, you can. It's really hot. That's how it works. But if you can manipulate, it'll stick to the surface of the glass, and you can get some really interesting random abstract sort of marble kind of effects. And you can blast that really, really hard and get some depth. And then when you clean and scrape off the hot glue gun, you're left with clear glass that you can then sandblast back over. So you can get multi-layers. You can build different layers of texture. The thing with sandblasting that you'll have to remember is you always blast the deepest section first. Okay, so you're working in low relief, but you're working from the deepest to the shallowest. So if you were to have 3 different layers of blasting, I mean, this is all very, very simple surface blast.
So that's not very hard. It's not going very far down.
No, I mean, it has got quite a texture on it, but it's not really going that deep. But then this type of window glass is very hard. I mean, this is only going in 1 millimetre, but it looks on the face of it like it's gone in quite deep. But you always work from the deepest to the shallowest, because you're working with some optical illusion on it, a lot of the time, and the deepest thing always looks sometimes closer, certainly if you look on it in the reverse. And it's just a simple optical thing caused by the edges where the glass is being blasted away. Because you get things like this, which is a piece of cast, but it's been sandblasted and then it's been polished up in certain areas so that you've got like a high gloss surface and then you've got a satin matte surface. And so I think it's always important to think about, if you're putting a texture or you're doing an effect on the surface, is to remember that glass is a nice, the whole point of glass is you can polish it and get light into it. If you can get light into it from a polished surface, then it'll highlight the texture of the sandblasted or the effect that was put on the textures. So it's a bit of a balance. It's one of these processes that you just really need to experiment with. I mean, I can tell you various kinds of resists. And the resists we've used in the past are very effective are using tapes to get flat areas, if you like. So you're working from deeply sandblasted back to very, very gentle, light touches.
How about if you are going to go really quite deep with the tape blast?
You don't maybe have to double up. The thing with the sandblaster, which I'll show you when I show you the nozzle is actually quite focused. So it's not like the whole area of the glass is being attacked. You're only concentrating on an area maybe the size of a 10-pence piece. So beyond that, so you can work up to the edge of the tape without actually blasting directly onto the tape, and it lasts a heck of a lot longer. It's always the edges that, obviously by the nature of how it works, which is just firing abrasive at it and attacking the surface. It's always careful to keep an eye on the edge of the tape, because it does creep underneath it and come with it. But tape, substantial tape, electrical insulation tape's okay. You can buy special heavy sandblasting quality type of tape, or vinyl tape, which costs a fortune. It's like 30 quid a roll. You're cheaper just using duct tape and doubling it up if you want to do deep stuff. Again, it's probably worth experimenting with. Parcel tape's no use because it's too thin. Good quality masking tape works, but again you have to double it up. Anything that's sticky actually is worth a try, because if you can stick it to the surface of the glass around a three-dimensional object, it should act as a resistor to a point. String or rope's really good for wrapping around and getting these kind of landscapey effects if you want to do kind of sort of vague abstract images. Wax is another good one that we've used. You can actually paint or drip wax onto the surface of glass. You can sandblast it away. It'll erode the edges slightly so you get a kind of nice soft quality. And then all you do is you can get white spirit and dissolve. If it's like microcrystalline wax or paraffin-based wax, you can dissolve the wax off then, or scrape it off, and it cleans back off quite easily. Nail varnish works really well because you can paint that on and you can control it. Again, it will get a wee bit eroded, and again you can just use acetone afterwards and wash it off. Latex works really well. It's a bit delicate, but if you paint it on a couple of coats, but when you're painting anything on like nail varnish, latex, or even hot wax, you have a degree of control, so you can, whereas using tape, you've got accuracy and you've got precision. These other types of resist are a bit they're less precise, but then it's selecting the right kind of resist for the right effect in it again, just by playing around with stuff. I think it's one of these things that if you have a rough idea of what kind of materials work, it's just to try other things. If you want to get into, doing images, there's ways of, we have a laser cutter and you could create a stencil in vinyl on the laser cutter, put that on as a resist, and then you could have quite accurate lettering.
So you just need to drop it inside and
put it in Illustrator or any vector path type program and take it down to John and get it laser cut, or there's a vinyl cutter in product design and you could have the resistance. It's a good way if you were doing multiples of decorations. You know, even if you were doing a set of wine glasses with initials or something, you know, and then you would cut out and use the negative. Use the negative on the positive, because there's not really any waste by doing it with vinyl cut. You can sandblast. If you were talking about sandblasting decoration, obviously you can sandblast it on glass. You can sandblast it on metal. Aluminium takes sandblasting really well, so does copper, brass. Steel, you can clean it up, and you can printmakers use the sandblaster for putting ground textures rather than having an etch a soft ground one, or sandblast it with a slightly coarser grit. You can sandblast wood very well. You can get some interesting effects in wood. Certainly if you've got wood that has a hard grain, you know, the grain and the rings that make up the tree, if it has a soft and a hard and a soft and a hard, let's say, I think we'll sandblast that, or wood that's been washed up on a beach, that's had a wee bit of sort of tumbling already. If you sandblast that, you can get really, really nice effects in the surface of wood, or anything that has a nice grain on it. Because the darker part is the harder part of the grain, and the lighter part is the softer part. You can get textures. You can sandblast balsa wood, ceramics. You can blast the glaze off. You can put glaze on and then blast it off. It's a bit dusty using this machine, and it's a wee bit noisy. So I'll show you how to work it before I switch it on, because I'm not shouting over the noise of the machine. Always wear the gloves. Okay. And the machine is basically a large metal box. That has a light in it and a window for viewing, which gets blasted, so this is probably needing probably time. Once the light's on, you can see, but because you have to keep cleaning, because it does generate a bit of dust. All it is a hopper that has the blast media. Pressurised air comes in, and you can control the pressure. The air under pressure comes up here, blows across the top of the pipe that the media comes out of, and it kind of sucks it up. It acts like a siphon, it sucks it up. So you've got a combination of high pressure air and very, very fine abrasive material. And this gives you an example of what it's like. It's aluminium oxide powder, and it looks like talcum, and it's very fine, and it doesn't feel gritty at all. But if you put it under a microscope, it's got triangles that are really, really sharp. Eventually, after, I don't know, depends what you're blasting and depends what the pressure is, it blunts off. What happens in the machine is the sharp stuff settles back and goes back down into the hopper. The light powder that's dull and blunt gets sucked out the back and goes into the extractor, and it settles. So you're kind of continually consuming the material, but it's recycling itself and it's sorting itself out. So you've got dust in here that's no use, and what's left in the machine. And if the machine, most of the time folks say, the sandblaster's not working. The sandblaster's working, it's just empty. So you have to keep remembering to top up occasionally, put a mug full of
Is that where
fat grit. Yeah, there's various kinds of grit. So it's always best to check with a technician before you put grit in, because we've had things in the past where people just grab a handful of something and put it in, and you end up with a weird concoction, which is a mixture of 3 different types of blast media, which is no use to anybody. Because for glass, you want a kind of fine media, which gives you a nice smooth, even thing. For metal, you want to be a bit coarser. Printmakers like it coarser because they like the texture, so the ink binds into the texture. So it's always best to check. And if in doubt, it's dead easy to clean the machine out, take the material out and put it in fresh. So you know you're starting with a fresh batch of sharp material that's suitable for the job you're going to do. The machine will only work when the door's locked and clipped, because there's a safety cut out here. So to operate it, you've got your piece of glass, you've got the nozzle, you hold the nozzle about 4 to 6 inches away from your work, and there's a foot switch down here which is you just press on. It won't work if the door's open, right? So So you can't sandblast yourself in the face, or your friends, or your hands, or anything. It's inoperable. Push the button in, it'll work. But then it generates a lot of dust, so it's a safety measure. Okay? A lot of the time, it needs to clip quite positively shut. A lot of the time, the work that you've got is usually small enough that you can hold it in your hand and push it through. Half the time, if it's big stuff, then obviously you need to keep opening the door. With small pieces of glass, we're obviously going to do some slumping around. You can sandblast it first and then put it in the kiln and set it up. So sometimes it's easier just to hold it in your hand and sandblast. I'll switch on the machine. I'll just blast this up just to show you. Take the tape off and show you the effect. And that'll be it. It's dead easy. The machine has different controls for setting the air pressure. I've set this to what we use for glass and for most things actually, and it should sit at 4 bar on the gauge down here. Okay. People do tend to muck about with it, but they don't really understand what they're doing. So if it's not working for any reason, as a technician.
So yeah, are we allowed to play about with that changing?
No. It's 4 is adequate for what you want to do for glass.
Yeah.
Unless you're really wanting to do some serious deep carving.
Yeah.
And to do carving, we'd have to maybe put in a coarser grit, put a new nozzle in the machine. But for general sort of surface textures and treatments and for the sort of low relief stuff, 4 is perfect. Okay.
Yep.
2 switches over here. One turns on the extractor, the other turns on the light. The machine has no other mechanical parts or mechanisms or anything. It's all about the air. If the air is on, and you can hear that, and you can see that the needle is somewhere up about the number 4 here, kind of at the sort of 11 o'clock position, and you hear the kss when you stand on it, it's all working. You can actually work it without having any of this contraption on, but it's a light. Extractor. You need the extractor. So hold the glass in one hand, the gun in the other, and hold it about 6 inches away, and keep moving. Well, you can. I mean, it does. The problem with this machine is, and it's the same with a lot of machines, when you sandblast something, some of it blasts back, and it always ends up it's just the nature of the design. It's probably poorly designed, but it ends up sandblasting the window that you're supposed to look at, which is
So you're not actually, you can't, it's not a lot of visibility.
well, there is. You just have to try and hold it and blast it. I mean, this Perspex sheet that protects the glass on the inside needs replaced. That's all. You just have to. Sometimes you have to peer in the gloom. If you're doing a lot of sandblasting, it kind of ends up kind of a bit cloudy inside anyway. So it's really point and shoot. The tape kind of got caught and lifted because it was just a random piece of glass. But it gives you a good example of, and again, you need a dark, it always works better against a dark surface. Transparent, opaque. You can see every kind of wrinkle and edge of the tape, and that's where it lifted up, and it's actually diffused slightly. And I mean, all that is you know, a random bit of glass and a random bit of
Do you
tape.
turn it, when you do it, do you turn it round and then do the other side?
Well, you don't have to. I mean, obviously, just for the purpose of this demonstration, I sandblasted the whole thing just to sandblast it. When you're actually holding the gun, rather than just, some people make a kind of, it's natural to assume this, you just hold it and you press it and it goes. If you actually move your hand just ever so gently in sort of gentle circular motion from your wrist, you get a better finish, because it kind of all helps to blend the texture in together. If you're pointing at the glass and just hold it, you'll end up, you potentially could lift the resist or blast some subtle design that you might be wanting to keep. You might blast that away. So it's easier sometimes to start holding it further away than you kind of need to. You get a feel for it, because somewhere between the sort of 4 to 6 to 7 inches range is the most effective. People also make the mistake of holding too close. If you hold it, the nozzle too close, all you'll do is degrade the nozzle. The nozzle's consumable, it's sacrificial, and it does get worn away. But holding it close doesn't mean better blasting. Actually, if you hold it slightly further away, you get a more effective blast, because the media gets a chance to travel up to the speed it needs to attack the surface of the glass. So usually somewhere around here, and you can see it. The good thing is with this white oxide stuff, aluminum oxide, you can see it coming out, so you know where it's going. Yeah, and if you just keep, it's difficult because you've got cumbersome gloves on. This doesn't really like to move because it's quite stiff because the hoses are rigid. But if you just use the sort of very gentle sort of circular action and keep moving it, you don't have to move like this crazily, but you just keep a little gentle circular motion, you get a far more efficient blast, and you'll get a nice even sandblast surface. Once you've sandblasted it and you're happy with it and you've removed all your resist, the best thing to do is to wash it all down and get all the surface abrasives off, because there is a wee bit of dust and powderiness to it. Then what you can do is, it's quite a contrast and sometimes it can be quite harsh. You can spray it with WD-40, or you can spray it with some very light oil, or take a cloth with some light oil and wipe that across, and it'll still say satin, it'll still stay textured, but it'll just give it more of a sort of wetter, contrasty look. It takes the harshness away.
Slightly mellower. It's not so.
Aye, because if you wet your finger, you can see it almost disappears, but when it starts to dry out, it's a bit more subtle. But if you lightly oil it, certainly if something's quite heavily carved and textured and you oil it, it gives it a sort of more of a kind of leaky, kind of acid polished finish. And then of course you can work back into it with real polishing equipment here for polishing glass. You can sandblast it, and then you can use a cork wheel with some pumice powder to then kind of polish back the highlights, so you get even more contrast. But I'll show you that on Monday.
Yeah.
And I'll show you finishing of cast objects on Monday as well. But this is so simple to use. It's literally 2 switches, point and shoot.
Yeah.
It's just a metal box with nasty dust in it, that's it. Yeah, that's it.